Hi everyone and welcome to Impact. We got a great new week ahead of us and we have many interesting topics and guests. But before we get to that, I always want to mention to you that we here at Impact love to hear from you. We want to hear your comments, your questions, your suggestions, or maybe you'd like to be a guest on Impact. You can contact us by email at impact@proctors.org, impact@proctors.org, or go to Facebook and like us on Facebook. Go to Impact Show on Facebook and click on like. Well, I'm Nick Barbie, your host. We got a great new week ahead of us, so stay tuned and we'll get on with the show. Next is our life segment. Greg Aidala is our host. Greg will be interviewing Lesley Leduc. Lesley is the Public Affairs Coordinator for the famous Yaddo Complex in Saratoga Springs, New York. Lesley will be talking about the exclusive Yaddo retreat, its history, and what's new at Yaddo. Let's watch.
Welcome back to another segment of Impact on Life. I'm your host, Greg Aidala. Joining me today is a woman that works at one of my favorite places in the entire world, and it's located right here in the Capital District. I'm talking about the exclusive artist retreat, Yaddo, in Saratoga Springs. Please help me welcome Public Affairs Coordinator for Yaddo, Lesley Leduc. Hi, Lesley, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you.
Thanks so much for coming down and spending a few minutes with me. I'll just tell the audience quickly. Last summer we met because I was on a different project, and you were gracious enough to have my film crew come in and open up the doors of Yaddo and see a different perspective, and let my father come with me, which was great, but just see a different perspective and just tell the audience more about Yaddo, brief history, and just the elegance of it all.
Well, thank you. Yaddo is an artist retreat. We have approximately 220 artists per year come to Yaddo to work, but it was founded by a couple named Spencer and Katrina Trask. It was their home at one time, and their plan for Yaddo was to turn it over to artists as a place to create. And the one thing that makes Yaddo different from other artist retreats is we don't emphasize a product, we emphasize the creative process.
Right.
So we don't ask to see what people do while they're there. Many of them share it with us, but we just assume that once they get there, they'll do what they're supposed to do.
That's one of the most fascinating things about Yaddo is that separateness where it's so conducive to the creative sense. And you get that, you know, I've been around the arts now for 11 years, perched headlong, and when you walk in there, it's just so, it has a supportive feeling, but it drops you back to really getting in touch with who you are and what you're supposed to be creating.
Well, it's one of the things that originally drew the Trask family to that particular piece of property.
Now that's late 1890s. Let's tell the people. We're talking, right?
Well, actually the early 1880s.
Early 1880s, they were there, and then Yaddo now is like,
right.
Okay,
Yaddo opened as an artist retreat in 1926 after both of the Trasks had passed away. But when they originally settled on that piece of property, it wasn't because the house was beautiful. I should mention that the house that's there now is not the house they originally lived in there. But it wasn't the house, it was that piece of property. Katrina Trask was a poet and a playwright, and it was just something about that piece of property that she felt something about, and she hoped that others would too. And it turns out that over the years the family was there, her poet friends and her actor and actress friends from the theater found that same sort of inspiration at Yaddo.
And let's talk about, speaking about people that have stayed there, I mean, let's tell some of the people who are some artists that have been there. I mean, you got Mario Puzo, Robert De Niro Sr. Right?
Yes.
You've got Cheever. Cheever was mischievous up there, wasn't he? He was like the Woody Woodpecker, the annoying guy up there. I love his stories. I've read about Cheever and his stories up at Yaddo, and I approached you last summer with some of the stuff, and some have been, you know, elaborated upon. But
well, I think he did a pretty good job of telling the stories himself. He was at Yaddo many, many times. Probably, I would guess, at least 15 or 20 times over the years.
Wow.
That doesn't happen for everybody that comes to Yaddo, but especially in the early days of Yaddo, there was really an attempt to help artists of all kinds, and not just writers, but artists that working in all genres that really needed that assistance and needed the time and the space. And although there is a story that I'm pretty sure is true, that the first time he applied, our then director, Elizabeth Ames, wrote back and told him to learn how to spell and reapply later.
That's great. And you know what you touched on, what I found very intriguing because you have to walk and you're outdoors, and it's the Adirondacks, and it's beautiful and it's serene. But as you go actually to the painters' rooms out in the fields, and I remember seeing the one tour, they had cut up wood and they can fuel their own fire out there. And what a, it's just the amazing global unity of all walks of art life is happening there. And it's so, it's a real treasure, you know, that it's there.
It is one of the things that the artists who come to Yaddo talk about the most, because it happens in real life for them, at least, that if you're a writer, most of your friends tend to be fellow writers. Same thing with a visual artist or a composer. So the day works at Yaddo that everybody has the entire day to work in their studios, but breakfast and dinner are taken together in the dining room in the mansion. And that brings up some interesting conversations that sometimes it's just interesting to sit and listen to a person working in a different genre talk about their work or how they approach their work. Or sometimes it actually leads to collaborations later on, lifelong friendships.
Yes. No, absolutely. And you know, something you touched on that I love, I love this story, and we talked about it last summer as well with the dining, because there are quote unquote laws and rules of Yaddo when you're there that you abide by, and you eat together. I believe it's breakfast. Is it lunch and dinner, or just breakfast and dinner?
Just
now?
breakfast and dinner.
Breakfast
Lunch
and
is
dinner.
packed in a lunch pail.
Okay, that's great, a little lunch box. And in the kitchen, right, in that living room area, there are two tables, and to the left is when is to the left when people want to talk and be to them, or is it be to themselves? And the right table.
It depends on what side of the room you're coming.
Oh, gotcha. So, but here's the point. There's two tables, and it's a great story. So, if you wake up, you're staying there, and you don't want to be bothered. You don't want to be bothered. You can sit at one table, and everyone knows if you're sitting there, anyone who sits there doesn't want to talk. But if you sit at this one, you talk away. And it would be great.
We call it the silent table.
The silent table.
Now,
and couples would love to have that table at home. Yeah, sit over there, honey, you're bothering me, and that's enough.
I can't remember if the sign was up when you were there, but there is actually a sign on that
table.
Okay.
I'm
it
sorry.
Actually sits a little off to the side of the dining room. It's kind of in a little window area.
I see. Now, you have, before we get into your upcoming events, the thing about Yaddo that's beautiful is not just the inside. It is the grounds and the public gardens, which I suggest you go and see this summer when they're in bloom. And tell more people about that.
The gardens are, it's about 10 acres of our estate, and the entire Yaddo estate is about 400 acres. But it was the wish of our founders that the gardens always remain open to the public. And we have this wonderful group of volunteers, the Yaddo Garden Association, which are primarily responsible for much of the upkeep of the gardens. It has a formal rose garden and then an informal rock garden. And if people have been to the gardens in recent years, you might have noticed that the rock garden fountain, which is man-made geyser, it's beautiful, but it hadn't been working. There were some problems with it, and many thanks to our friends at the Adirondack Trust Company.
Oh, very nice.
A substantial gift. The fountain is now repaired, and sometime within the next 2 weeks, usually the last week in April or the first week in May, the fountain water will be turned on in all the fountains at Yaddo.
Very nice. So you're talking about the big one at the foot of the hill?
No, it's actually behind the big pergola. It looks
it
literally looks like a geyser.
The geyser, yeah. You know, I've noticed in the past couple summers it hasn't, right?
No, it's fixed.
That is fantastic. Working. That's nice because it always has a nice mist.
Yes.
Oh, very nice. All right, so what does Yaddo have coming up, you know, this spring and summer with events?
Well, we're very excited to announce that our benefit this year in Saratoga Springs will be on June 19th. And we get to mix a couple of genres this year. Our benefit always features artists who have been guests at Yaddo in some way or another. This year we have a gentleman by the name of Will Hermes. He's a writer. He's a senior editor for Rolling Stone magazine, and he just published this book. It's called Love Goes to Buildings on Fire. Sorry, this is a little tough one. Love Goes to Buildings on Fire. 5 years in New York City that changed the music forever.
Nice.
And we're going to have him talking about his book, but how we're going to work it is sort of like you and I are doing right now. It's going to be an interview with a Yaddo composer named Nathan Barr. You might not know Nathan Barr's name, but I'm sure you know his music. He's written music for a lot of films, and he wrote the theme song and writes most of the music that's featured on the HBO show True Blood.
Ah, that's fantastic. And this is going to be open to the public?
It is open to the public. There is a charge. You can check our website out for that.
Yeah, that's yaddo.org.
Yes.
Yes, yaddo.org. That's fantastic. What else you got coming up? Come on.
Well, we're not ready to talk about it in detail yet, but you will be hearing a lot about Yaddo, I think, over the next 5 years. This year we are in the process of creating a master plan for our facilities and buildings. We're sort of at the tipping point right now as far as we have 17 buildings on the estate.
Wow.
Some of them, and most all of them date back to the turn of the century. So we're getting ready to actually tear down 2 buildings.
Is that right?
Replace them.
Wow, very nice.
One is further along in the process. It is a building, it's a smaller building, it has 2 studios in it, and we are going to be tearing that down at the end of August. And then hopefully within 18 months, a new building will replace it.
Nice.
And we're very excited about it because this new building will have 2 studios in it, but one of them will be specifically made to accommodate a composer, not a composer, a choreographer, or somebody who works in performance art. It will have a springboard floor. We've never had anything about that like that at Yaddo, and one of the things we're trying to look at right now is what can we do to meet the needs of artists today. Contemporary artists have different needs. So many of the genres kind of mix together now. So these studios will be a little bit bigger in size than some of the ones we have.
You know, that's really good to hear, because I can speak, you know, a lot of dealings and friends. I've made great friends over the 11 years across the country, and I think we're all at a point we talk about change and growth and what goes on in the art world, and it's great to hear that, you know, Yaddo is that far looking into it and trying to understand and grow with the global art world. So I mean that's really super good. That's good. It's progressive and
I
it
think
helps.
one of the interesting things to me is that I've been at Yaddo for several years now, but not centuries.
No.
In the time I have been there, even the admissions process has changed. When I first came to Yaddo,
and explain that quickly, because when you came, let's start right where you came from. You're from Oregon,
right?
Right. You're from Pacific Northwest. You come to the Adirondacks. It's similar in look, but this is what I like about my guests that aren't from the area. They get this different insight, and I think it's healthy.
So I do too.
Yeah.
And when I first came to Yaddo, we had 3 judging panels. We had literature, musical composition, and visual arts. And then we recognized that that doesn't really encompass all the artists who come to Yaddo, and we sort of morphed some of those committees off, and now we have 5 admissions panels.
Wow.
We've included film as a separate panel and performance art as a separate panel.
Nice.
We, in case people are interested, we do get approximately 1,200 to 1,400 applications per year, and about 20% of those
Get
are
accepted
approved for
and approved.
admission.
Wow, that's great.
So-
And now the gardens are open. They're open year round. What are the times that people can visit the
The
gardens?
gardens are open dawn to dusk,
Dawn to
daily.
dusk, daily.
If
Oh.
you want to come out when it's snowing, that's fine with us.
Yeah, and I've seen it. I've seen it in all seasons, Yaddo, and it's worth your time, and it's a treasure, and it's a beautiful, beautiful establishment. And to learn more about Yaddo and their facilities and their hours in the gardens, go to yaddo.org. I want to thank my guest, Lesley Leduc, for coming in. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
It's always fun.
Oh, it is always fun. You're a good spirit, and I wish you guys all the best of luck, and hats off to a great place.
Great, thanks.
So again, for another episode of Impact on Life, I'm your host, Greg Aidala. We'll see you next time, everybody.
Proctors, bringing the best in arts, education, and entertainment.